The cloud. All right. Well, I want to welcome you to Peter White Public Library and to our monthly authors reading virtually. My name is Marty Ackitts, and I'm the adult programming coordinator for Peter White Public Library. And it is my it's my honor. I'm so excited to have Colby Cedar Smith here. I've loved Colby since I read her book, Call Me Athena. Here it is, everybody. And she's got it too. It's just a fantastic read. And if you have not had the chance to read it, you need to do yourself a favor and go and pick it up. It's so good. But let me let you know of a couple things that are upcoming this coming month in the next week or so here at Peter White Public Library. So let's see. This Friday, well, weather permitting, because we're supposed to be getting like 24, 25 inches of snow. So yeah, but this Friday, weather permitting, we are going to have our global cinema at a matinee at 12 p.m. and we're going to be showing Ryosuke Hamaguchi's Drive My Car, which won the International Oscar feature film Oscar last year. And then we're also going to be hosting a Diversity Common Reader program book club discussion on Being Seen, One Deafblind Woman's Fight to End Ableism. And that's at 4 p.m. on Friday as well. And then next week, Monday, for those of you that are interested in a little taste of the Irish for St. Patrick's Day, we're going to be hosting the Knockabouts in concert at 7 p.m. in the community room. Lots of other great stuff happening this month. You can go to our library page. And of course, next month, since I know you're here because you love poetry. So next month we have the Great Lakes Poetry Festival, which is the last week of April. We're hosting a lot of great poets, Jonathan Johnson and Pulitzer Prize winner Diane Seuss and Beverly Mathern, who's going to be releasing her new book we have a book launch party for her. So lots of great poetry stuff coming up. But tonight we have Colby Cedar Smith with us here. And let me just tell you a little bit about Colby. She's an award-winning poet, novelist, educator, and she spent the last 20 years teaching creative writing and storytelling workshops in elementary and secondary schools, art museums, nature centers, community centers, and corporations. And let me tell you, it's a tough audience. I've done that for elementary and secondary schools trying to teach poetry. That is a tough audience. But also, I think that those age of kids are sort of natural poets in and of themselves. So anyway, her poetry has been a finalist for over 20 poetry prizes. I'm not gonna go through them all, don't worry. I'm just gonna name a few of them. The Iowa Review Poetry Award, the Newsletter Poetry Prize, the Colorado Prize for Poetry. She was the semifinalist for the 92 Discovery Boston Review Poetry Prize. And in 2020, Colby received the New Jersey Council on the Arts Fellowship in Poetry. And we are here tonight because Colby published this wonderful novel in verse called Call Me Athena, Girl from Detroit, which I'm just going to name a few of these prizes because it's one that's so many prizes. It has been chosen as the Junior Library Guild Gold Selection Standard Selection, an American Booksellers Association Kids Indie Next Pick, a Sybil's Award Poetry finalist, and a 2021 Goodreads Choice Best Poetry nominee. She was a Kids Book Choice finalist for Stellar Storytelling, a 2022 Independent Publisher Book Award Silver Medal for YA Fiction. I mean, it just goes on. 2022 Silver Nautilus Award for Lyric Prose, a 2021 Michigan Notable Book. Yay, Michigan. We know what we're doing here. And also a winner of the Midwest Book Award for YA Fiction. And Colby holds a BA in creative writing from Colorado College and also an EDM. Is that a master's in education, Colby?
It's a master's in education. Yeah.
Education from Harvard University. So please give a big Peter White Public Library welcome to Colby Cedar Smith.
Thank you so much, Marty. That's such a kind introduction, and I'm so happy to be here. For those in attendance and also for those who will watch later, I'm so excited every single time I get to talk to any people in Michigan, because as you know, this book is it even has Detroit in the title. It's Call Me Athena, Girl from Detroit. And really, this was written as a love letter for my grandmother, who struggled with Alzheimer's for years, and in the end lost all of her storytelling capabilities. And as a kid, I would listen at her feet, and I wanted to hear every single thing that she told me over and over again about her childhood and living in Greektown, and her father working at the Ford factory and the foundry. She was Ford's elevator girl, and so she knew him personally. And she had all of these amazing stories about her family, who her mother was a French immigrant and her father was a Greek immigrant, and they met in Europe during World War I. And I really felt like writing this book was the best way that I could possibly honor her and her storytelling. And I really wrote it for my children and her 6 great grandchildren. And I wrote it for Detroit. And I think having it be honored by the Michigan State Library as a Michigan, notable book was an absolute pleasure, and astonishing to me that Michigan would take it and own it as their own. And it now lives in the Michigan State Library, and I can't think of anything that my grandmother would love more than that. So without further ado, I might read you a few of these poems. And I really, the book is different than other novels in verse for that you might read, because it has 3 different points of view. It has 3 different perspectives that are braided together. It also has 3 different locations and 2 different time periods. So it's a hefty tome. It's an intergenerational story. It is it's a complicated story. It is sold as a young adult fiction piece, but it's also very oriented towards an adult audience. And I really feel like anyone from age 12 to 99 can read it. And it was written that way, and it's written in poetry. And if you've never read a novel in verse written in poetry, it reads like a novel from front to back. It has character arcs, it has story arcs, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end to the story, but there is a lot of white space on the page. So it is actually 575 individual stories that make up a novel. So it's not quite poetry and it's not quite fiction. And I think that mixed genre piece was so fascinating to write. So what I want to do is I want to read a little bit from each of these 3 perspectives. And I'm going to start with Mary's voice, and that is my grandmother, Mary Scandalaris. And we're going to start off in Detroit, Michigan in 1933. So if you think about it, we've already had Black Friday, we've had the fall of the stock market. The Ford factory has vastly decreased the amount of cars that they're producing. They've laid off a lot of workers. This is the time of the Ford massacre, the hunger strikes. This is a very turbulent time. And this family of immigrants is struggling to find their way in this new country. And one of the things that has carried over from her father's culture is that they have decided that they want an arranged marriage for her. And this is Mary, who is really struggling with how to be a modern American woman with these very traditional Greek roots. Specifically, the Greek part of the family is quite traditional. That side of the family They want her to have an arranged marriage. They want her to speak Greek. They want to eat Greek food. They want to go to Greek church. They want to live in a Greek neighborhood. So, and so we start here at a moment where she's describing what it's like to have conversations about this new marriage, that proposal, and also how she feels about being a good Greek girl. Your eyes are the color of cultures clashing, she says, as she kisses me between my lashes. The dark brown of the Greeks mixed with the stormy gray of northwestern France. My eyes turn green with anger. Oh, Mary, calm yourself. You must get used to the idea of marriage. Marguerite pats my hand, her eyes calm as a fox, liquid pools of the sweetest amber. My eyes glow like a serpent. And also Marguerite is her twin sister. The 16-year-old girls in our town are precious candies waiting in a crystal dish. The boys get to reach in, choose whichever treat they want. Marguerite will be taken by a man from a good family. She is sweet and brings a smile to your mouth. When I talk, boys look like they've bitten on something bitter. I imagine I'm pulling on a silk dress with a feathered boa and matching slippers. Instead, I squeeze into a wool dress that is 2 sizes too small. The fabric barely buttons across my growing breasts. I'm filled with defeat even before I arrive at the battlefront, school. I tuck mother's rouge, a secret, into my pocket, secure my stockings with hidden red ribbons around my thighs, a little color just for me. I try to fix my hair, never sleek and kempt, a dark brown, wild, tickling monster that longs for the inside of my mouth. I've always felt a woman's power is in her hair. The problem is I have more of it than most, and I have no idea how to tame it. We climb down the stairs, pass through our father's store, and enter the busy street. Our neighborhood smells like trash, metal, and oil, ammonia, slaughtered chickens, and roasted goat meat. Folks from Greece, Romania, Poland, and Mexico, and many Black families who've come up from the South inhabit the row houses and duplexes along our street. Most of our neighbors came to Detroit because Ford paid his workers well, $5 a day. Word spread far and wide. My mother says I'll never have to travel or learn the ways of the world. The whole world lives in Detroit. For 20 years, the factories fed and nourished every part of this town. Food on the table, money in the schools, doctors for the sick. Every morning, the citizens walk in one direction toward the factory floors, the River Rouge, animals gathering at the watering hole. Detroit drank deep, sustenance. Now water is scarce. We pray the source won't run dry. Marguerite and I hold hands as we pass the lines. Neighbors wait in the courtyard of the Sacred Heart Church. A nun ladles soup into wooden bowls. The priest rips bread and places it into waiting mouths. A woman stands on a soapbox, speaking so vehemently, spittle flicks from her teeth. I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. It's difficult to decide where to look. A town of weathered tents lined the streets, families living in the dirt. Women beg for coins with their children on their laps, children so thin you can see their bones through their worn shirts, skin peeling from sitting in the sun, teeth brown from hunger. A hollow-cheeked man sits underneath a cloth banner that reads, Hoover's Poor Farm. He holds a cardboard sign painted with angry words about our last president. Hard times are still hoovering over us. His son stands beside him. He bounces a ball and chants, little pig, let me in, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in. Folks know once you find yourself sitting on the road in Hooverville, it's hard to get back on your feet. I hear a rumble behind us. I look up to see a boy my age driving a brand new red Ford Cabriolet. Through the open cab, I can see his pinstriped suit. He looks as if he's never had to worry. Curly blonde hair bounces as he speeds down the road, the rest of us getting covered in dust. When we get to the school, two boys are dragging each other through the yard. Gus climbs on top of them and pulls them apart. He winds up with a bloody lip before the bell rings. We file into the classroom. I hear Evie Williams talking about me. 2 sizes too small. You can see everything. Her friend Faye looks at me and mouths an apology. Evie stares at the popping buttons on my dress. Eyes wide like the barrel of a gun, loaded and ready to fire. My whole body feels hot and panic swells my brain. I'm a sack of grain with a target painted on my chest. I settle on a bench between Marguerite and Elena. Elena's parents are from Romania. She was born in America, just like us. Elena's cheeks are ripe, round plums. Her black, straight hair smells like cooked cabbage. We link our elbows together. If our school were a garden, I think Elena, Marguerite, and I would be growing on the very same vine. We rise and pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. We all speak in different accents. Our voices ring in unison, liberty and justice for all. For a brief moment, it feels like we might have something in common. Then I see Evie sneering at me again. Career. Our teacher, Mrs. Patterson, scribbles the word on the blackboard, asks us to write a paragraph about what we want to do when we graduate. What are your dreams? My brothers start writing immediately. John wants to be a pilot. Gus wants to be a soldier. Jim wants to build skyscrapers. Marguerite wants to be a homemaker. I don't write anything. Good Greek girls know better than to dream. Good Greek girls never speak before spoken to. Good Greek girls never ride bikes. Good Greek girls marry at a young age. Good Greek girls take care of the babies at home. Good Greek girls don't have jobs. Good Greek girls don't dance and smoke and drink. Good Greek girls never complain. I don't know if I want to be a good Greek girl. And I think I want to read one more thing that I think fits with this. Mrs. Patterson tells us to be proud. We live in the city of transportation, founded on Henry Ford's original idea. The busy hands of builders forge and lathe, work and tend, spin and weave, form and transform the ideas of men into objects for the world. She stands in front of the class, her hands clasped under her chin. Wonder spreads across her face as she says, "We are proud of our city and our brothers and fathers who have built the foundation of our modern nation." Yes, we are proud of our brothers and our fathers. But I want to ask, what about our sisters and our mothers who carry generations in their wombs? Who rise and feed us, clothe us and tend to us, who birth each day into being. So from Detroit, we go to the coast of central Greece. And you have to imagine, I went as a child to visit my relatives there, and you have to imagine this beautiful bay that's this like glorious green, blue, turquoise water. And it's in almost like a crescent. And then you travel upward into these hills that are dry and olive groves. And so The character Yorgos, who we call Geo in the book, is from this part of central Greece, and it's the beginning of World War I, and the soldiers have entered his village, and everyone expects every young man to fight, and he doesn't want to fight, and he wants to take care of his sister and his mother, and he ends up trying to take care of them, but getting into really serious trouble. And so I usually don't read this, but I got kind of excited about it today. This is his very, I think, breathtaking run from the village. And you have to imagine it's at night. He's like struggling to make it out of this alive. And he has this vision. He's been trying to build a fisherman's boat, a boat to fish in. His father was killed at sea. And so a lot of the beginning of the book, you see him working on this boat, and the idea of a boat as being very, very important for him. So we'll see that coming up in some of these poems. So he's now running. Hold on one second. Everything is breath. Everything is heartbeat. I run as fast as I can. I hear men shouting and dogs barking. Do you see him? Where did he go? I know this land. I find the opening of the cave where Violetta and I used to explore. Don't breathe. Don't move. I wait. Stay hidden. Stay silent. Even after the sound of the dogs and the men are gone, my heart beats like a battle drum. I follow the shadows home, my steps soft and light. I hide in the bushes, check to make sure no one sees me. A barn owl calls out a warning as I enter our yard. I see my unfinished kaiki, that's the boat. The smooth boards that I have sanded for hours. I do not have the wood and resin I need to finish the hull. Without it, I won't be able to navigate across the water. My mother is asleep in her bed. My heart aches at the thought of saying goodbye. I sneak around the house, try not to wake her, find a sack and stuff it with figs and tomatoes, then fill a sheep's bladder with water, pack matches and a warm sweater, roll a thin wool blanket, tie it to my sack. If I don't leave now, I will go to prison. I open the door of my childhood home. My mother rises. From her face, I know that the men from the village have told her. I cannot open my mouth to say goodbye. She holds my shoulders as tears stream down her face. Finally, she looks at me in my eyes with love sharp as an eagle's talon. Go, my child, and never come back. I mean, can you imagine? All right, so now we'll skip a tiny bit ahead to him running. I dream of the gods, of my ancestors, superhumans who swoop down from Mount Olympus on swift chariots, pulled by powerful horses. They know I am suffering. The gods of wine and beauty, the harvest and the sea, I pray they will help me. Shower me with bolts of lightning that will pierce the heart of anyone who wishes harm. But I am afraid that the ancient immortals have vanished, and we are left with one God who has turned his back on me. I sell the donkey to a fat farmer for almost nothing and hitch a ride on a horse-drawn cart on its way to Athens. The miles rattle through my bones. When we get closer to the city, I see the ruins of the Acropolis poised high on a limestone bluff. Bright blue sky peers through the gleaming white columns of the Parthenon. I feel the power of the stone pulse into me. We weave south through the streets of Athens, heading to the port of Piraeus. The harbor looks like the gates of hell. Factories fill the skyline. Smokestacks cough a black sludge. A huge ship looms above like a mountain of welded steel. I know, I have always known I have to get on that ship. And then this is once he's on the ship as a stowaway. He has, he's basically asking his sister's forgiveness. On a bench beneath the stars, sisters see me, poised on the edge of the earth, hovering between the black of ocean and sky. Sister, hear me. I wish I could throw a hatchet into the heavens, tear a hole in the gut of the past. Sister, forgive me. My rage, my guilt, my fear, I am to blame. I know the cries of a fatherless son. I surrender my grief to the Furies, 3 sisters with snakes in their hair, coal black bodies, bat wings, and blood red eyes. I imagine the mythical crones rip into my flesh, punish me with their claws. I try to brush them away, but I know I will never be free. As they whisper and hiss into my ear, do not dream, young one. You will never return to your homeland. It's emotional to read these. And then we will travel to France, to Saint-Malo, France, where my great grandmother Jeanne was from. And this is a very different circumstance. Mary's situation in Detroit, her family has 0 resources. We definitely see how desolate Geo is in Greece. And then we come to Saint-Malo, France, which is a beautiful medieval town in France, right on this gorgeous Emerald Sea. And Jeanne comes from a very privileged background. Her father's a doctor. They live in a beautiful place. So we'll see this juxtapositioning of this educated, wealthy girl who in the end loses everything like the rest of them. And then gains everything in the end. All right, so this is Jeanne, Saint-Malo, France, 1915. The smell of the sea climbs the walls of our city like a salty, dangerous pirate who steals into my bedroom and whispers into my ear, come with me. The night turns me into a sparrow, wings tipped with golden arrows. The stars sing in the firmament, a song that belongs to me alone. Come home. We live in a house on the top of a hill filled with beautiful things and a maid to dust them. We live in a house with a small black dog named Felix who eats out of a crystal bowl. We live in a house filled with visitors who drink champagne and dine on oysters and canapé in the rose garden. We live in a house as old as the cathedral with a balcony door that opens to the Emerald Sea. We live in a house filled with books, tales of adventure and voyages. I wonder if these stories will ever be written about me. You can hear my dog in the background, so just ignore that. I wonder if these stories will ever be written about me. A letter arrives. Papa breaks a government red wax seal to open it. He is needed in the war effort. They know he will be a wonderful doctor in the French Foreign Legion. It is time for him to fulfill his duty to his country. He will leave the day after Christmas. He throws the letter into the fire. It crackles and spit and rises up the chimney, black as smoke. It is mid-December and we gather with our neighbors for La Fête de Noël, our winter festival. It's my favorite day of the year. We eat crepes filled with sugar and jam and galette saucisse, spiced sausages, and we drink cider and chouchan, a honey brew. My father's friends pat him on the back and wish him luck. Neighbors thank him for his service. The music begins. We laugh and breathe hard as we dance and sing in a circle chain to the bagpipes, the accordion, the fiddle, and the drum. Two sisters join the stage and sing an a cappella song. We stop to listen. Their voices wind around each other, a threaded bobbin whirling inside a spinning wheel. They sing Le Chant de Marin, a sailor's song for our people. I'm about to sing. Are you in? The Bretons are wild like the purple heather that grows on a rocky shore. The Bretons are sweet like the gold we squeeze from the depths of the honey lore. The Bretons are brave as the northern wind, and we know that we must pray to the Lord our God to keep our ships from that dark and watery grave. Oh, keep us from that watery grave. Oh, keep us from that grave. So after that, I really want to bring these different parts together and read a little moment where Mary, after being really told by her parents that she's going to have this this arranged marriage, and we see, you know, these traditional backgrounds in flashbacks, and what her reaction to this is. And I think this really shows the desolate position, but also my grandmother's, you know, mental refusal of it and her motivation for a lot of the book. My dog is like right here licking me. It's a big white golden retriever. A meeting, I know, hi. A meeting is arranged. My mother rakes a comb through my unkempt black curly hair, a trainer combing the barn and dust out of a horse's mane. Marguerite stands in the doorframe looking sympathetic. She knows my mother's comb is coming for her next. I want to lift both my legs and kick like a stubborn mule, not the prized, sleek racehorse my mother is grooming me to be. Why can't I choose to marry a man I love? My mother stops brushing my hair. She looks around our tiny apartment, throws her hands in the air. Look where that got me. Mother slices the cake. Father pours cherry liqueur into small glasses. Mary made this herself, he says, and pats my arm with pride. Demetrius takes a sip and smiles politely. They leave us alone in the parlor. Golden icons of Mary and baby Jesus look down at me from high on the shelves. Demetrius scoots next to me. The side of his body is touching mine. You are a beautiful young girl, he says, as he takes a lock of my hair and twists it around his finger. His breath smells like death and onions. Who is this wicked old man? He wants a child. I want to grow the claws and wings of a gorgon, feed his eyes to the hungry creatures that live in the depths of the swamp, turn him into stone. When I was 12, my mother and I embroidered a soft white gown, 2 sheets and 2 pillowcases, every single piece decorated with pink and yellow flowers. We folded them carefully into my cedar dowry chest. I imagined with each stitch How excited I would be to wear a nightgown in front of a man for the first time. Now I know I have sewn the bed that I must lie in. These linens will be my prison. Let's see, it's 7:37. I was wondering how long it would go. And so I think I want to maybe read one more, which is actually the last poem in the book. And honestly, my writing of the book sort of started here, which is this joining of all of the voices of ancestors and my grandmother and my father and mine and my sisters and all of us kind of joining together in this book. And so I love this last poem and I'd like to read it at the end. In my dream, air fills my lungs. My chest rises and falls. I can hear my city breathing. Up and down, rise and fall. In my dream, Marguerite and I are flying over the river that cuts through town. We travel with the current until we can see the entire country. The rolling hills of wheat swaying in the wind, the mountains pushing upward, the rivers spilling their waters into the ocean, the swell of the stars close above us. In my dream, I can see my father and his sister traveling over the ocean on the wings of the wind. I can feel the joyous breathing of the people, land, and sky. In my dream, I know our family in the heavens, and with our feet on this glorious land, are finally together, traveling toward the sun.
Wow. I'm so glad you read that last poem because it's one of my favorite in the entire book. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. I
Thank
love
you.
it too.
Thank you so much. I mean, that was such a beautiful, I mean, you gave us like such a good, like view of all of those characters. So gorgeous. And I know who this person is. This is Beth, and she said that you have a lovely voice, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that because whenever I hear myself on interviews or watch Zooms again, I'm always like, who is that talking?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
it's just so good. So yeah, I mean, Beth just says linens will be my prison. She says that's amazing.
Oh.
Very, very nice. Your imagery is amazing. was having troubles with my internet connection.
Oh no.
So yeah, so I missed the middle part about you said the man had, how is he related to you? Or how's he related to your grandma?
So my grandmother was Mary and her parents were Jean, and we called him George, but in Greek it's Yorgos, and
Okay.
Shortened to Geo, which was his,
Okay.
like,
Okay.
Mm.
So
these are my like great grandparents and my
your
grandmother.
great grandma came from wealth. Your great grandpa did not?
No.
Okay. No. He was the stowaway on the boat?
He was the stowaway on a boat, but in the end, Jean, and in her whole section, she actually loses both of her parents during the war, and she goes in, her aunt is the mother superior in a convent, and so she becomes a novice nun, and she basically runs away with this swarthy, super cool soldier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a nurse too in the
She's
hospital, and she's taking care of him when he's wounded. So yeah.
And it's very romantic. It's very romantic. Like, in fact, my parents were like, wow, you really added a lot of romance to it.
Well,
that's like, well, yeah, go ahead, Marty.
I was going to say, that's one of my questions, how do you make these choices? Like, how much, I mean, I know that it's based on your family, how much you fictionalize or how much you have to imagine, in order to get the story. I mean, how much of that?
It's a really good question. And there's a very delicate balance of, I mean, it's absolutely fiction, But a lot of it is based on the structure of the real story. You know, she was a nurse, she was in Sao Paulo, and it's like so complicated to talk about all this, but like I learned more and more and more as I got into it. And we still have one living relative, Aunt Lee, who lives outside of Detroit. And so there were conversations that happened with her, and you know, emails between my dad and her. So it's like you know some things, but when you really start to dig in, you can learn a lot more. But it really started with like what I knew about it. Like there are some things in this that you would never think were real. Like the moment with Eleanor Roosevelt, where she comes to their house on Christmas Day with a limousine and presents for the kids and everything. That is a real
true
story.
See,
My
I thought
I heard it from
yes.
my grandmother. I heard it again from the brothers at family weddings. Like I heard it over and over and over again. And I could never, and the letter that Jean writes to the newspaper to say, we're struggling, we're immigrants, what are you going to do about it, is real. My grandfather worked in the Ford factory because she got him that job.
Wow.
So, and then he did really lose his thumbs. But some of it is like, I did have to imagine, like we knew that the family in Greece was, we knew they struggled. We knew there was like imprisonment, there was starvation, there was trying to feed the family. There was dangerous situations that they were put in. And so I had to make up the scenario. Like what has, like starvation, stealing food, imprisonment, running away, basically, what is the story? And so it's things like that. I had to really like deeply think about like what would cause a person to leave their village, what would cause a person not to be able to return. And the way they were portrayed to me, and I did meet them when I was a kid, but like they died when I was young. But they were, the way my grandmother describes them is like they were hard, they were war torn, they were not always kind, they had great big expectations for their family, and what they were going to be in America and how they were going to succeed and dig in. They were really, really, really concentrating on their kids being American because they were born here and there was no way to return back. So I wanted to give them humanness. I wanted to give them this like what causes, other than war, but like really what causes a woman to run away from a convent like with a dude? Like that's gotta be some sexy stuff.
Yeah.
And like it's really hard to think about this woman who definitely struggled, lost children, like they took in boarders to make their rent, like she had tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, and then developed addictions because of it, honestly, later in her life. So it's like, how do you give her humanity? How do you give her dignity? How do you tell her story with dignity? And I feel like you can always say like, and these are my family stories, so it's not like I'm going and telling stories outside of my lane. Like these are my family stories. So, but also it's hard to put yourself in the perspective of a character who is a real person in real life, and that comes with responsibility. And it's hard. I don't know how they actually felt. And so there were definitely moments where I was like wandering around in my garden, like talking to butterflies and like deer in my yard. And like there was at this time there was like a newborn baby fawn that like was nested in my garden, and I was like, well, what am I supposed to do, baby fawn? Like how do I tell this story? But it kept on coming that like I kept on being on the right route, and like then everything that Aunt Lee would say would like make me feel like I was like on the right route. And everything that I would read after I had written things from magazines and articles and books, and like it all just like felt like it was building the story that she had already told me, that was already in my blood, that like had lived in my cellular structure. So I just kind of trusted. And I say in the author letter in the back, like it was really just leaning into it and like listening to voices and like watching these movies play through my mind and just trusting that I was going to do well by them. And I like swear to God, I go to my grave hoping they love it. I think they will. I think they do. Because it lives in the Michigan library. Like it's not like anything that I wrote was like outside of what happened,
Yeah. So I mean, obviously your family members have read it. Have you had any kind of reaction? I mean, I'm just sort of curious about the reaction that family members had once they read your book.
Yeah, I mean, my dad was like all in from the get-go. Like I was kind of like, do I have permission to do this? And he was like, absolutely. There's no better person in our family to do it. None of them are writers. And like nobody really had that ambition. Like we have, educators and social scientists and, like janitorial supply salesmen, in our family. So it's like, I was given full permission at the beginning, and also my immediate family is very loving and supportive. And so, and I let my dad, specifically because it's his mom, I let my dad read every single draft that was created and, told him he had full ownership of, if he didn't want things to go in, but he was really just about sharing the story. Like it's a powerful story. It's a great story. And I think, and in the end, Aunt Lee read it, and I think she was definitely, she's like 98, I think.
Wow.
So, and she liked it a lot, and she was definitely like, well, it like, it's a little bit different than the story, but it's a lot, like there's stuff there. So, but she really liked it as a literary piece. And so I think everyone's into it. And that's really permission giving to an artist, to create something, poetic and moving. And I really like the whole time it was for my grandmother, but it was for the beauty of the story too. Like a novelist always has to honor the story being told. And that's what I did.
It's just sort of me. I mean, I was all in the book. I mean, I mean, even when I was reading it, I was like, are these real letters that she used, or did she create these? And then when I got to the Eleanor Roosevelt, I was like, I was like, is this true? Because I mean, it's like an amazing fact. And I was like,
I know.
I thought that was my one point where I was like, okay, that's got to be fictionalized. I cannot believe that.
I know. The letters, actually, I did write myself, but there was conversation about letters that had been written back and forth. And at a moment, there was a box of letters. And also on my mom's side of the family, there's a box of letters. And my parents have a box of letters. And honestly, I met my husband in 1996 and lived abroad for 6 months when we were first dating. And for us, there's a box of letters. So it's like, this is something that is real and findable in attics, So, but I did honestly write, I wanted them to be also poetry in themselves. And I wanted them, actually, I think the letters are some of the most powerful poems in the book. And so that is where a little bit of artistry was placed. But there are letters somewhere out there. Or in the ether.
But and of course, we sort of talked about this a little bit before we got started, But I want to ask you about the process, the different process of writing a collection of poems versus writing a novel in verse, because I mean, that kind of sustained voice and sustained story and stuff. I as a poet myself, I can't imagine how you do that. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah, I mean, I think naturally, like I proclaimed myself a poet at age 8, and I've been writing poetry ever since. I had, my degree at Colorado College is a degree in English and creative writing. I've been working on that craft for many years, and I feel pretty solid at it. Like, I've published in some pretty awesome magazines. I've gotten some nice like honors and awards, but I had no idea how to write a novel. And also I went from the adult poetry world into the world of children's literature, even though it's upper YA and can read adult. I still, I started out actually going to a couple of conferences with the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. And immediately I knew that like I was not normal in that sphere. Like, it's very rare that an adult writer goes into the kidlit world. I feel like often kidlit writers go into the adult world, but like it's a very, and I have a lot to say actually also about like in our society how much like honor and glorification is given to adult literature versus children's literature and YA, and actually YA literature is some of the best literature out there right now. It's amazing. So so that's an aside, but I went to this first conference. I sat down with this really amazing agent, and I was basically like, what do you think? It was like Yorgis's like first couple, like 20 pages. And she had read it on the train from New York City to New Jersey, where I live. And she just like was silent. And I was like, oh crap. And she looked me straight in the eye and she was like, who are you? And I was like, I'm Colby Cedar Smith. I have 2 children. I live in Hopewell, New Jersey. And she was just like, this is not normal. It's not normal for the kidlit world. And so immediately I was like, oh, I have a voice that I haven't even like tapped into yet. I have created something that doesn't look normal in this world. And it's because I have this like 25 years of background in something else. And there are examples like Margarita Engel, who also writes novels in verse for children. It's like she takes all of this like beautiful biology background and turns it into books for kids. So it's like we all take what we get, But anyway, I took that like moment where she gave me some beautiful like acknowledgement, and then I read probably 25 novels in verse, and then I read 25 books about how to create a novel, and then I put together a first draft, which was 195 pages, and you can tell this is not 195 pages, it's 575. And I ended up getting that agent, who then helped me edit it a different time. And then it was submitted to publishing companies. And it was, I got 3 revise and resubmits, which now I understand that that's like a really powerful place to be. It's like a roadmap to yes. At the time I got them, I cried for 6 months. And then my agent quit. And all the time I'm like reading, like, how do I build a novel? How do I build a novel? How do I build a novel? Because I think it was really easy for me to do these like separate scenes, like write a poem and have it click like I think Robert Frost was the person to say like a poem should click like a like a lacquered box.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I thought, well, if I can make and this is one thing that I think I do well, if I can make every single one of these 575 pages click like a lacquered box, and then you get to the end of like Mary's like 10-page section and you're like,
Mhm.
and then you go to the next section and you're like, so I wanted that like emotional response. Like that's why you write in poetry, right? You
Yeah.
get down to this, like I call it music and bones. And it's like paring down the language to like the basic skeleton, but then adding this like emphasis and music and beauty and something you can't do in prose. And the fact that you can do both of those together in this form is amazing. So in the end, I got a new agent. We rewrote it again. We wrote it again. We wrote it like it's been through like 12 different drafts.
Wow.
And then it finally found, like when she submitted it again, we had a lot of interest and a lot of editors loved it. And like it kind of died in some of the sales departments, which is crazy. Actually, when you sell like a book to large publishing companies like this, the editor could love it. Like it could be their favorite book that they've read. So you've got like an editor at Penguin who's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Then they have to take it to their editorial team and they have to convince those like 5 to 7 people that it's the best book that they've read in the year, or like the top 5, because they might get 5 that they get to add to the list. And then those 7 editors have to go to the sales team. And then they have to convince the sales team they can actually make money off of it. And then that sales team has to go to the publisher and then they have a big meeting. So there's like 5 different places they can die. The fact that any book is on the shelf is incredible. And I understand now that like I learned how to write this book. It took 5 years for me to learn how to write this book and get it on a shelf. And the fact that it's on a shelf is like, it's a team sport. I did not do this alone.
That's incredible. I mean, yeah, I can't. I still, you know, because each one of your poems has that moment where I can't remember what poet who described it. It might have been Sharon Olds or something. It's like the jar lid clicking on a jar, and
Yeah,
like,
which is like close to yeah, exactly.
yeah. And each one of those poems is like when I was reading the book, I got to the end of each of those poems and I'm like, that is such a fantastic poem. But the way that they build in the story is just amazing to me. And that's what I so admire in this whole form.
And it really did start out as like a whole bunch of disparate poems that didn't quite do that. And it's a skill that can be taught, you know, it's a skill that can be learned, which just takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
Like my editors and agents often say that like the thing that can be taught is like the structure of how to tell a story, but the thing that cannot be taught is the voice behind that story. And I think I'm so excited that I feel like I had all of my life been searching for the voice or a voice or what made me unique in the world. And when I found this format, I was like, oh, shoot, I got a voice. There's something that uniquely works in my brain that can hold all of these stories and can see the big picture and can wind all of these threads together. And I always describe myself as a weaver. Like whatever I write, I'm like weaving a tapestry with it. And I really feel like there were moments in the book where I was like weaving, and then moments where like you pull it apart and you unwind it, and then you weave it, and you unwind it. And I just feel so honored in this lifetime to have found something that feels like it's mine.
Yeah. I mean, and the whole book, I mean, I know we're getting close. Oh my gosh, it's 8:01. Wow, I could do this all night long.
I know. Me too.
Yeah, it's but I mean, the book has got like this kind of cinematic scope to it too, where I mean, it's almost like watching these movie scenes unfold as you're reading it. Which like I said, I can't tell you how much I admire this book for what you accomplished in it. And the fact that you were able to like create these three very distinct voices, because I mean, it would be really easy, I think, as a poet to just have one book, one poem, that one voice that like goes through the whole book. That's easy. But you in this book have to create three separate voices that are very, very distinct. And so
Yes.
that when you get to them, like I can read a poem and I'm like, oh, I know who this is. And then you read the next poem, you know, or whatever, the next section is like, okay, yes, I recognize the different voices. So the fact that you were able to create those really distinct voices in those poems is like astounding to me.
Oh, that's so kind. Thank you. It was hard work and like not easy, but it felt so amazing to like, you know, you when you're like weaving it all together, it's like I had piles on the floor of all of these different voices and they were color coded and I physically weaved them together. Like it was like, you know, like one, 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 one. And it is an incredible thing to like honor so many people in my family at once and to see how we all fit into this grand map of our family. And I really do feel like being the scribe of that, or being the you know, the person who gets to tell that story is an incredible joy for me. As I write my next book, which is also a multi POV book, and it's very, very different, but it has like, it's a novel in verse, and it has a historic character and a modern character. And the historic character is actually a woman musician from the 1600s in Venice. And so it's really lush and sensual and interesting to me. But I'm doing the same thing, like, how do we create these bridges from the past to the future and from the future to the past? And like, how do these people need each other? And is there still this sort of like shimmering ability to kind of like go between the veil of these places, thematically, intellectually, spiritually? It's like, does this pathway exist? And I think as we see these movies right now in Hollywood, like you know, I always say this name wrong, but Everything Everywhere
All at once.
Yeah. It's like, we as humans want this connection to history. We want this connection to what we are, the ground we are laying for the groundwork we're laying for the future. I want my children to tell my story. I want my great grandchildren to tell my story. And I want to like tell the story of my family and women in the past. And I want to make them relevant to people today. It's such a beautiful thing. It's so great. I don't know. I want to do this for the rest of my life.
Well, you know what? Please do. And that was going to be my last question. It's like, what are you working on now? Just because I love finding out. I mean, so I'm really excited that you're sticking with that format and that form.
Yeah. It's a little bit more adult and it's a little bit more racy. So hopefully the people have read.
Well, you know, but I do agree with you that the most exciting literature being written today now is in the YA form. I mean, people don't get it, but people are doing such exciting, different stuff in YA literature that you can't even go to in adult literature.
No, you can't. And honestly, it's really weird to me that like YA books are like feeding the vast majority of the TV that people are watching,
Mhm.
like Shadow and Bone and like all of these, you know, mercurial, beautiful, you know, fantasy and sci-fi books and
Yeah.
series that we're watching are all YA books.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's interesting because then people will be like, oh, that's YA, you know?
Exactly. I mean, and some of the most, I mean, some of the most popular film franchises, all YA literature. And yeah, I wish that people would realize how exciting I mean, frankly, when new books come in, the first here at the library, first thing that I look for are the YA books. Okay, what's good here and what can I
Yeah.
read? So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome.
so exciting.
And I think it's really what is not really working in the publishing world and the bookstore world and the library world, I think, and I don't know how to fix it, is that we have to live so closely in our range. Like we have to be kidlit, we have to be YA, we have to be adult, we have to live in these sections. And that's basically so people know where to put them on the shelf. But the fact is that really amazing books throughout the history of time have never lived in any of these categories. And they are the really, really gorgeous, beautiful ones can like go every which direction for all different populations of people. And I think that's my goal for a lot of the books that I'm going to write in the future, is to just make them something for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I've been recommending your book to everybody.
Oh my God, please keep doing it. We are alive as authors because of librarians like you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just, I mean, I don't even tell people it's a YA book. I just say it's a novel in verse. You're going to love this. It's
Yeah.
so good. And I mean, I hate pigeonholing literature like that. I really
know.
do. So I don't even say it's YA or this or that. I just say this is a really good book. And that's all you really need to know.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the work you're doing for it. That you're being a champion. I love it.
Yeah,
It's
it's
really-
so good. And you know, and we're way over time here. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate how much time and I love your beautiful reading. And I hope we can stay in touch.
Yeah,
I
definitely we will. And
yeah,
let me know if you have new projects coming out. I'd love to support you too.
oh, awesome. Well, I really thank you, Colby. I thank you, Beth, for showing up tonight. And I hope that you can come back in April for all of the great poetry stuff that we have coming, especially Diane Seuss at the end of the month. That's going to be very
Oh my
exciting.
gosh. Diane
Yeah.
Seuss.
And
We love you, Diane.
it'll be recorded, Colby, so you
Yeah.
could come to our events page and see it. So
I would definitely love to. It sounds like you do an amazing job curating this reading series. So
oh,
thank you so
so
much to you and also people in the country like you who do this. It's really an incredible benefit to your community and also the country because we can all watch these things.
All right. Well,
All right.
thank you so much, Colby.
Thank you.
And
Take care.
everybody have a
Nice
good
to meet you.
night.
All
All
right.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.